had an 11-hour back surgery in January and healing so well. Everything was great. 2 weeks ago, I could walk without a cane, and I'm losing my balance. So my back surgeon now wants to operate on my neck. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, it's an unusual day. So I'm even going to go off script because as I was driving here, and then I was standing 10 minutes at the toll booth, and I had all these other thoughts that I wanted to put in that sermon. And that reminded me that when I was just a young in ministry, second, third year, it was torture to write a sermon with depth. And I had to go do research on the internet, and I ended up writing Google sermons or Wikipedia sermons. And now, especially because of the invention of the smartphone where I can dictate, the sermon I started writing, the Sermon on Wisdom, about 3 weeks ago, I started dictating chunks of it, and beginning of this week, I sat down and I wanted to put it all together, and I ended up with an hour of sermon. And I thought, you would not want that. But there's one thing that, because today I'm wearing the collar, and there's a reason for that. Because that's, for me, the reason to wear that is because of wisdom. Not necessarily for in here, but when I did my chaplaincy training, the supervisor asked us to play around with it, experiment, see what feels good, what feels right, and he says he does not require us wearing that. So, first week I didn't wear it, second week I wore it, and I discovered that when I wear the collar, often people come up to me because they realize I'm a pastor, I'm supposed to be a caring person, and they talk to me. And not that long ago, I was at the hospital as a volunteer, and then I went shopping. And the cashier at Walmart, I said, "Are you a pastor?" I said, "Yes." And then she started crying. She said, "I wish I had someone to talk to." And I said, when can you take off? And then, we sat at McDonald's in the Walmart, and we could talk, and I could just listen. I think that's what she needed most than everything else. So and there's another wisdom, listening. In pastoral counseling, we have learned, and that's book learning, that there are 3 levels of listening. The first level is when somebody comes to you in counseling or privately and says, "Man, I'm so tired of my husband." And in the first level of listening, you would say, "Well, I can totally understand it. My husband," or what's much worse, "Well, you shouldn't feel that way." Horrible. And then the second level of listening, you get better in just asking clarifying questions and so on. And then in the third level of listening, you have this magic talent that you can really listen constructively. And this is where the wisdom comes in. Because you can learn about those levels in a book or from a teacher. But you do not know how to do third level listening unless there's some wisdom in you. Because that's when you have to listen between the lines. You have to not only listen, but also look at the body language and all that. And that you cannot learn from a book or from a teacher. That's something that has to come from within you. Now, I want to, the official start, now starting, tell you about Wise Woman, because you might have wondered about that title. What would Wise Woman do? It was a therapy experience with my wonderful therapist, the Reverend Mark Holter. It is called Future Self-Exercise. It takes about half an hour, and I just want to give you kind of the very short version. Within this half hour, Mark invited me to fly. I was able to fly up, 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 up. And I liked it so much, I kept going up, 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 and then I was in space, and I just loved it. And then, eventually he talked me down again. He said, "Okay, time to..." When I arrived at home, 20 years had passed. And then he said, "And you see this person coming up, don't you?" And in my imagination, "Yeah, I saw this." And there was this older woman walking with a cane, a wonderful smile on her face. And we ended up sitting down on a picnic bench and having great conversations. And then Mark says, "Can you name that person?" I said, "Oh, it's Wise Woman." It came out of me. This Wise Woman is in me. So for about 8 years, I called on Wise Woman when I needed some advice when I was just really lost. What am I going to do in this situation at church? How can I deal with my daughters and so on? And last Christmas, I had a really toxic person in my congregation in New York, and I just didn't know what to do. And so I called a wise woman again, and she came, we met, and I asked her, what am I going to do? And she says, you know what? You don't need me anymore. I said, why? Don't go away. She said, well, no, but you are a wise woman now. I said, wow, awesome. So, I can still have conversations with her, but I don't need her anymore that much because I know that I have a lot of that wisdom in myself. So, okay, maybe next page. Yeah, this story doesn't mean that you can do this. Don't do it alone. I don't think it's a good idea, although there are YouTube videos. It's better to have a human being guide you. And you have to have this imagination, this creative, crazy imagination. It doesn't work for everybody. So, but I wanted to explain her. And there's this one saying, so far you have survived 100% of your worst days. You're doing great. So where does wisdom come from? I mean, how do you get insights, aha moments? I mean, you can't buy them at Amazon.com, right? Just like everything else, and how can you become wise? There's not one answer, of course. But what doesn't work? You cannot get wisdom out of books. You cannot get wisdom from teachers. I know a few people with PhDs who are not wise at all. So that's, wisdom does not come from book learning or so. What helps is to have experiences in life and to be open to experiences and to be just a little bit weird, crazy. I mean, scratch that. You definitely do not become wise by watching TV. Don't need to say more, right? And then, stop and smell the roses. That's become such a cliche. And a lot of people just roll their eyes when they hear that. But it is very wise to realize that this is so true. It's so important, especially in this rat race that we're in. Even I'm retired now. And do I have a break ever? No. So stop and smell a rose or a fuchsia or a dandelion or whatever. Not only stop, as you saw there, and I wish it'd been darker. You have to watch it. The URL is in the order of service. We just, cursory looks, we don't really see details anymore. We do not see the beauty in a butterfly. We're no longer awed by a rainbow. And that's a big loss. So if we can get ourselves to slow down and just stop a moment. And then, take a deep breath. It's healthy. And you also slow down and see and hear more and learn a lot about what's going on. Gratitude, that's the theme of that meditation. I have two quotes from very different people. Piglet noticed that even though he had a very small heart, it could hold a rather large amount of gratitude. And then Maya Angelou, this is a wonderful day. I've never seen that one before. And, I'm just adding another one out of script again. Thich Nhat Hanh, famous Buddhist monk and teacher, he said, every morning I say, wow, 24 brand new hours, and they're all mine. And that's a great attitude to have when you get out of bed, before you get out of bed. So, practicing gratitude is actually a spiritual discipline. And if you learn to explore all the good stuff around you And when you start seeing that, like, man, this wooden floor, this is awesome, how they can cut this so well, and it's smooth and all that. And we're no longer walking on clay. Or it's all these little things, or this, for me, the biggest miracle is always that there's hot water coming out of the wall when I take a shower. I just, wow, awesome. So, engaging in a spiritual, this is a discipline. It's good if you do this regularly, either in the morning or at night or at lunchtime. Write down 5 or 6 things or whatever, or just stop 3 times a day. And consciously, intentionally look around you, and you will find something. Wisdom very often comes from unexpected sources. I'm sure you have all experienced that. Of course, you all know this saying, out of the mouths of babes. Sometimes kids say the most amazing things, unexpected things. And most famously, the emperor's new clothes. This naked guy on parade, and only a child has the wisdom to speak up and say, hey, he's naked. It's partly that it might be the first time that this child has seen a naked person outside his home, if ever. And it might also be that there is a society that represses the speaking of truth. But wisdom comes in when you say, this is really important to nudge people and say, isn't there something wrong with that picture? The thing with kids, maybe the first time, kids still have this amazement, and they speak when they see a butterfly for the first time or a rainbow or so. It pays to listen to small children. Now, wise woman believes that one of her biggest and probably most important insights is what Socrates said 2,000 some years ago in Greece. He said it in Greek, but he said, I know that I don't know. When I was a teenager in high school, I learned that, and I thought, that is weird. We go to school for 12 years. We learn everything we need to know, right? I mean, when you're 14, 15, that's what you're saying. And you probably know everything already anyway. But it's so important that you are aware of that, that there is always more to learn, more to learn, more to learn, more to see, more to experience. Don't close your mind off. Don't say, okay, now I'm retired, now I'm not going to do anything anymore. Or, now I come home from work and I just watch TV, I'll just crash. And sometimes we need that, but this should not be your routine. Don't make it your routine. Another thing that wise woman really likes to talk about is wisdom as a jigsaw puzzle. They have all these experiences in your life, what you saw as a child, what you heard as an adult, what you realized when you were in ministry preaching. All these little pieces, they seem to be totally unconnected. And then when you have this aha moment, there are 2 or 3 pieces that, didn't really know what to do with. They fall into place. And I have this moment in developmental psychology class when I finally realized why I had to read all this boring book. It's all like, man, now it makes sense. Or another thing that happened to me, I wrote a eulogy for a memorial service for a 42-year-old healthy park ranger who died on the trail from a heart attack. What do you say? What on earth can you say? And I called a colleague and he said, well, read the book of Job again. I said, what? The book of Job? Oh my God, this is horrible. Why would I read that again? No. He says, well, then just the end. Just read God's monologue. And all of a sudden it made sense. The wisdom of Job. I don't want, this is another sermon. But believe me, it makes a lot of sense. And then, not that long ago, in my doctoral narrative theology class, one class I learned why people with PTSD tell their story without change. Their story never changes. If they have been traumatized, and this could be a woman who's been raped, a child that observed a fire, war, anything. When those people tell their story, it never changes all the details. A woman who's been raped will remember the pattern of the wallpaper in that room 40 years later, and will be able to describe it. And I didn't get that. Because, most war veterans, when they talk about the war, like my father did, every year it got a little bit rosier, a little bit funnier. It wasn't all that bad. And, the reason is that they need to tell the story again and again. And so, there's some wisdom. It's also off script, but I think that might be helpful for some of you. We used to believe that, don't remind them of the story. Do not, don't bring up old wounds. And the opposite is true. You need to encourage people who have been traumatized to tell the story again and again. And eventually it will get better. So, jigsaw puzzles. Back to jigsaw puzzles. This is how I started this chapter here. Any of you do jigsaw puzzles or used to do jigsaw puzzles? Okay. Yeah, okay. The funny thing is, last week when I started putting this sermon back together from all those pieces, I got an email from a friend, total coincidence, with, it was called Jigsaw Wisdom. And I'm going to read a few. There were 10 points, but I want to read a few to you. First one, don't force a fit. If something is meant to be, it will come together naturally. When things aren't going so well, take a break. Everything will look different when you return. Perseverance pays off. Every important puzzle went together bit by bit, piece by piece. You do not have to leave. This child is a member of the community. Unless he has a temper tantrum, you do not have to leave. Please. No, that's fine. Variety is the spice of life. It's the different colors and patterns that make the puzzle interesting. It's like this baby. It's one piece of the community in here. Establish the border first. I always do that. Anybody else does that first? Yeah. Couldn't do without it. He says boundaries give a sense of security and order. And finally, don't be afraid to try different combinations. Some matches are surprising. So, this makes sense even if you don't do jigsaw puzzles. Now, something on the negative side, I guess, of wisdom, or the negative wisdom, wisdom of negative things, whatever. Toxic words. And this is where I have to cut because it would take too long. But there are toxic words, not only in English, in every language. And the 4 worst are always and never, nobody and everybody. Very often you hear that. My husband never does the dishes, or she just doesn't know how to make potato salad. She never makes good potato salad. Or on the other side, but he always gets it. Why don't I get this toy? He always gets it. He always gets everything he asks for. Or everybody's doing it, so why don't you? They seem to be harmless words, but most often they are used as weapons in arguments. And most often they aren't really true, not all the way true. So when you observe yourself using this word, stop and see if you can rephrase it. Rephrase it, yeah. It's good for you and it's good for the person you're talking about or talking to. It creates more peace and understanding. Another word is should, but I don't want to go into it. But the worst part of using should is when you use it as a moral statement. Try always to rephrase that. And I was thinking about it even today, which is very positive, when the speaker about the recipient of the donations said, all women should be Yeah, we know that, right? But why don't we say all women have to be supported? It's much stronger. It's calls for action. Should is wishy-washy. It's, we should really doing it, but we're not. And then you can should yourself to death when you say, well, I should have done this, I should have done that. Parents are champions. We're talking, looking back at how they raise their kids. Oh, I should have been much stricter with him. Or I should not have been so lenient with her. So that's it. So it is also, it's toxic because it's very, most often should is used with this moral, with this raised finger. I'm cutting this, and I'm cutting that. Again, wise woman would suggest to rephrase. I should have done that. The question that wise woman asks is, okay, at that point when you made that decision, did you make that decision based on what you knew to be best? Or did you intentionally do the wrong thing? You know what I mean? When as a parent you do something with your child or to your child, you do that because at that point, this is for you the best, the right thing. You don't know anything else. So why 20 years later say, well, I should have. No, you should not have. You couldn't have. So, okay, end of should. Oh, Mamma mia. Going back to the beginning, for the children, I used the Bible, and I said the Bible is a very wise book. It took me 2.5 years of seminary to get there. I started out hating the fact that I had to take a year of New Testament and a year of the Hebrew Bible, and then somehow suddenly, this jigsaw puzzle, things fell into place, and all of a sudden that made sense, and that makes sense. If the Bible is explained to you, it can make such a difference. It is used by people who cannot read it out of context. They always have to read it, how life was 2,000 years ago, 4,000 years ago. Wise woman realized that was something I was passionate about, and so she encouraged me to write a whole curriculum for you congregations called the Bible for Liberals. And you learn how much wonderful stuff you can get from the Bible. And now, the most significant, the highlight of this sermon, my wise woman's most significant insight. And it's about, all know the mind-body connection. Just about everybody now knows about it, and just about everybody accepts that there is a connection between your mind and your body. What I have realized is that there is still something missing, and that's the spirit. And, let me just, spirit might be a hard word for you to grapple with. Let me just, for the sake of this sermon, say spirit cannot be turned on or off. Whereas emotions, if you're really sad, you can read a funny book or you talk to somebody else. You can do something about being sad. But if you're grieving, grief cannot be turned off. You cannot start grieving for someone. It's just, that's in your spirit. Grief is a spiritual thing. You can say emotion. So, pay more attention to what it is that's going on in you. Whether that's a feeling that you could actually do something about, or whether it's a spiritual problem and you might want to hook up with a spiritual director or adopt a spiritual discipline. Most important about spiritual disciplines is that you're quiet, or you give your spirit time to settle down or to float around in whatever spirit does. I don't know. I haven't seen it yet. But it's something worth thinking about. And I have, in York Hospital, they have narrative medicine classes for the optional, for residents and for the nurses. And I joined them several times, and they said, we need to connect that. Somehow we have to tie that into the class, because we're thinking about the mind, but we're not thinking about what's going on in a person's spirit. one area where there's in Turkey there is a saying that says, "Fear kills your soul. Fear eats your soul," actually, and that's really true. Because fear, anxiety, is a spiritual problem or a spiritual part of you, and if you keep acting out of fear, if you just keep trying to protect yourself, you build walls or you lock the doors in the church or in the schools, or like the most horrible thing, I was in Dallaston High School talking about Unitarian Universalism. Every door that leads outside has this huge sign saying, "Do not open this door to visitors." Isn't that awful? What are we doing to the spirit of those children? And it's understandable. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know why. But it's totally the wrong thing. Only if you talk to strangers, only if you learn about them, then you can overcome your anxiety. And then you can allow reason to come in. Reason that will tell you that statistically it is much more dangerous to cross the street, anywhere. And that there are much more shootings in offices than in schools, and so on and so on. But anyway, so that's anxiety, and what happens with our anxiety is another big problem that I'm working on. And again, I want to say this saying, you have already survived 100% of your worst days. You're doing great. You know where I found that? It was on the Berlin Wall. Before it was torn down, of course. It was graffiti on the Berlin Wall. I lived in Berlin for 3 years, and I learned another one of the spiritual lessons, one of those things that fell in place. The people in East Berlin, they had more food for the first 2 years, and they had firewood, but West Berlin didn't have it because of the blockade. But in East Berlin, there was no hope. There was no encouragement for people, there was no goal to work towards, there was no community spirit, and also there was the wall iron. They couldn't go anywhere. West Berlin very soon realized that they actually had friends despite all the horrible things that they did. The Americans, the British, even the French sometimes, they flew in firewood, they flew in food, and we call the candy bombers. They dropped candy at that one airfield for the children. So, this is, I don't know how important it is, but it gave people their spirit back, the spirit to life, to live on. Well, I think this is enough. I'm around during coffee hour. I have a few, what do I have? Yeah, just one-liners. Wise woman one-liners. Practice gratitude as often and wherever you can. Let it be. If you feel road rage coming on, you're in the car, and want to go. You know what's good medicine? The Serenity Prayer. Because you can't change it. You cannot change anything about what's happening in the road in front of you. Or if you're parenting teenagers, same thing. And then manure occurreth. You all know that. Manure occurreth. I printed out signs, I've got them at home. And your value doesn't decrease based on someone's inability to see your worth. And finally, don't sweat the small stuff. That's wisdom. Talk to me during coffee hour if you have questions or if you disagree.